Ordinary Catholic priests found themselves in extraordinarily dangerous circumstances under the anti-clerical, socialist regime in Mexico. Father Mateo Correa Magallanes was no exception. Even though facing arrest and possible execution for each religious act of his Catholic vocation, the man of God persevered and continued to tend to his persecuted flock, arriving at his new pastoral assignment, the parish of Valparaiso, on March 1, 1926. Unfortunately, the following day, March 2, the infamous and ruthless General Eulogio Ortiz Reyes also arrived at his new assignment, also in Valparaiso. Tyrannical head of military operations, an anti-Catholic persecutory arm of authority, he was a soldier of the worst sort, a socialist veteran of the Mexican Revolution and a Caísta, a follower not of Christ, but of the Christophobic president of Mexico, Plutarco Elias Calles. Almost immediately after Ortiz's arrival, the general, known unaffectionately as Eulogio the Cruel, ordered the new pastor, Correa, and his vicar, Father José Adolfo Arroyo, to report to his office. "What is your work here?" Ortiz demanded of Correa. "Work of peace," the new pastor answered. "This is work of peace," Ortiz fumed, holding out a piece of paper. "The priest does not know about the manifesto because he just arrived," interrupted Arroyo. "Yeah, sure he doesn't know about it," Ortiz said sarcastically and yelled, "He just arrived and is raising hell." The manifesto Father Arroyo spoke of, focused on gathering signatures for a national referendum, spearheaded by the National League for the Defense of Religious Liberty, that would be dispatched to the Congress of the Union, requesting the repeal of anti-Catholic laws contained in the 1917 political constitution of the United Mexican States. Ortiz bombarded Correa with questions. Why was he in Valparaiso? What was he doing in town? What did he intend to do while in town? Correa responded with tranquility. His mission as parish priest was noble, and his intentions were peaceful. As for Arroyo, he simply explained that his mission as vicar was to help the parish priest in the exercise of his divine ministry. When questioning finished, Ortiz ordered, "Get ready because I'm going to take you to Zacatecas to put you in prison for being seditious. Do you have something to go in?" "No, sir," they answered. "Well, you will go by foot," he said, instructing them to return to the rectory to prepare for the journey. "As you like, my general," Correa answered as the two priests left. Ortiz next approached Vicente Rodarte, Pascual R. Padilla and Lucilo J. Caldera, three imprisoned members of the Catholic Association of Mexican Youth, who had worked zealously to gather signatures for the local Valparaiso group, established by Arroyo, on August 9, 1925. Their success had infuriated Ortiz, who had them locked up. The general asked Caldera, president of the local association, "Do you believe in Catholicism?" "Yes, sir," Caldera answered. "So, you believe that if I killed you right now that you would go to heaven?" "I believe so, with God's help," answered Caldera as Ortiz walked away disgusted. After learning about the arrest of the two priests and the three members of the association, the outraged townsfolk of Valparaiso decided to make sure that the political prisoners would not be transported out of town and out of sight. A commission of church women rushed over to the local military operation headquarters and demanded to speak with Ortiz. When confronted, he vociferously spewed anti-Catholic views, especially maligning the priests, describing them as immoral, citing that as the reason why they were to be transported immediately to Zacatecas City. But the faithful would be neither daunted nor deterred. The day after the arrests, the townsfolk, many armed with weapons, arrived early in the morning at Ortiz's headquarters with plans to thwart or even assault anyone who attempted to transfer the 5 soldiers of Christ. Faced with the threatening attitude of the religious mob, minutes before sitting down to eat his already prepared breakfast, the pusillanimous general fled, at 7 a.m., for Zacatecas, accompanied by 15 soldiers who all would have been attacked and killed if Arroyo had not calmed the riotous crowd. Relentless, the delegate of Catholic women hounded Ortiz. They pursued him, traveling nearly 100 miles to Zacatecas City to confront the sadistic general and to force him to soften his hatred for the priests as well as the young men who had been released from jail after the escape of the general and his men. Cursing at them, the revolutionary demanded that they deliver the 5 Catholic men to him. Or else. Before leaving the city, the women met with the interim governor, Leonardo Reséndiz de Vila. His suggestion, the wanted men should meet with him first, to give him an opportunity to calm Ortiz. So, on March 8, when the women arrived back in Valparaiso, they informed Correa that he, his vicar and the 3 members of the association had to report to the military operation headquarters in Zacatecas City, but first they should speak with the interim governor. Correa was very familiar with the capital city, for it was there, in 1881, he entered the conciliar seminary of the Purísima, where he received the sacrament of holy orders, on August 20, 1893. Years later, after the eruption of the Mexican Revolution, on November 20, 1910, the revolutionaries grabbed control of the country and began seizing Catholic property, including the seminary, stolen from the church without compensation and turned into a barracks and prison. Although very few of the townsfolk approved that the men should go, most demanded that they should not. But following orders from authorities, the 5 Catholic men left Valparaiso that night and arrived in Zacatecas City the next morning at 10. Directly they went to the gubernatorial palace, where they found the interim governor, who scolded them for getting off too close to the military operation headquarters because Ortiz was waiting for them. During the meeting he agreed that they were not criminals, but nonetheless the Christophobic general wanted them dead. He had an idea: Ortiz may soon permanently leave the city, so they should go into hiding until he departs. The 5 sought refuge in San Jose Hospital, where the Reverend Mother Rafael de las Minimas, a blood sister of the priest, served her mission. But the next day at 10 a.m. they received an urgent message from the interim governor: report to Ortiz at his private residence. Immediately. Before meeting with the general they visited Bishop Ignacio Plasencia y Morera, who encouraged them but warned them that they would suffer for Christ. The bishop blessed them and they left, arriving at Ortiz's residence at noon. "Why hadn't you come?" Ortiz asked the priests. "For lack of money," Correa answered. "Yes, for lack of money, poor Mexican clergy, as poor as this," he taunted, and then turned to the members of the association. "And you, why hadn't you come?" "Because you ordered us to present ourselves together with the priests," Caldera explained. Calling his secretary, Ortiz ordered that the 5 Catholics be handed over to the public ministry and charged with sedition based on the manifesto and the circular of the General Committee of the association. This pair of priests is deceiving these stupid young men. By means of and in accordance with the likes of the bishop they are preparing a revolution, Ortiz declared, telling guards, "While the order is being made, these sons of whores must be put in a cell." Escorted to a filthy room, at 12:45 p.m. on March 10, the prisoners immediately prayed the rosary and then settled down into the squalor. After locked up for 6 days, on March 16 they were ordered to be immediately released after a district judge declared that the accused had committed no crime. Outraged at the juridical loss, the humiliated Ortiz vowed revenge on Correa, whom he blamed as the puppet master pulling the strings of the members of the association, responsible for all that they did. Released from custody, Correa and Arroyo sought to meet again with the Bishop of Zacatecas at the Episcopal Palace. However, he had been evicted following the nationalization of the building stolen by government forces without restitution. Eventually they located him at the home of Fernando Lejeune, where the bishop joyfully greeted and embraced them. Listening to the ordeals that his priests had experienced and endured, and learning that Ortiz had threatened death if they returned to their parish in Valparaiso, the bishop informed them that, because of the impending danger, they were free either to return or not to return. And if they did not return, he decided that he would not send other priests because the risk of execution was just too great. Following some discussion, prayer, and contemplation, the priests decided to entrust their fate to God and to return to their parishioners, alone without spiritual guidance, suffering under the brutal fist of the socialist regime. The following morning, March 17, the feast of St. Patrick, the priests offered their daily masses, ate breakfast, and then departed for Valparaiso at 8:30 a.m., without visiting anyone else, to avoid any new dangers. Along the way, they were seen by parishioners, who spread the good news. As soon as the two priests arrived in town, they were greeted with flowers, tolling church bells and cheers from faithful, crying with joy. Upon their approach to the front of the church, everyone rushed forward to hug the men. And once inside, Correa prayed the rosary and preached about charity, love of one's fellow man, toward enemies. When the members of the association arrived, they kneeled before Correa and requested a blessing from the modern-day Miles Christianus, who wielded weapons of kindness and understanding. Because of their brief imprisonment, the association, defender of the principles, freedoms, and rights of the Church, gained many recruits, which resulted in an avalanche of signatures. The Army of Young Catholics also posted copies of the Foundation's manifesto and the program of the League on walls along the streets, for which some were arrested as per the orders of Ortiz. But having committed no punishable crime, they were soon released, much to the displeasure of the general, whose uncharitable hatred for Correa festered. On June 14, 1926, the regime signed into law, set to take effect on July 31, the anti-Catholic legislation, the law for reforming the penal code, commonly referred to as Calles Law, because it was an executive decree from Calles, the Mexican president, who, basically, outlawed Catholicism. Subsequently, the Mexican bishops ordered, on July 25, 1926, that all churches be closed to the sacraments starting July 31. In part, the episcopal letter stated, "In the impossibility of continuing to exercise the sacred ministry according to the conditions imposed by the aforementioned decree, after having consulted with our Most Holy Father, His Holiness Pius XI, and obtained his approval, we order that, from July 31 of this year, until we decide otherwise, the public worship that requires the intervention of the priest will be suspended in all the temples of the Republic. We warn you, beloved children, that it is not a matter of imposing the very serious penalty of the interdict, but rather using the only means that we currently have to express our disagreement with the anti-religious articles of the Constitution and the laws that sanction them. The temples will not be closed, so that the faithful can continue to pray in them. The priests in charge of them will withdraw from them to exempt themselves from the penalties imposed by the executive decree, therefore being exempt from giving the notice required by law. We leave the temples in the care of the faithful, and we are sure that they will conserve with total care the sanctuaries that they inherited from their elders, or those at the cost of sacrifices they built and consecrated themselves to worship God." Preparations began. To spiritually arm the members of the association for the impending spiritual battles, Correa offered a series of spiritual exercises, first published, in 1548, by the founder of the Order of Jesus, Saint Ignatius of Loyola, based on the Spaniard's personal meditations, contemplations, and prayers. In the final hours, on the final day, Friday, July 30th, services were held in the 12,000 Roman Catholic churches throughout Mexico. Priests offered continuous masses every 30 minutes to parishioners, elbow to elbow, clamoring for the sacraments in standing room-only facilities until nightfall, when the government grabbed control of church annexes and sealed up ecclesiastical treasures, in accordance with the religious regulations that were to become effective the next day, July 31st. To add insult to injury, Mexican President Calles gave the Pope's representative, Monsignor Tito Crespi, 24 hours to leave Mexico, all reported by the New York Times. On that day, Correa, with a heavy heart, asked Arroyo to prepare the parish church in Valparaiso, while he, himself, prepared the church in Lobotos, to make ready for the in-church boycott of the 7 sacraments: baptism, confirmation, Holy Eucharist, penance, extreme unction, holy orders, and matrimony. Undeterred, even though there were no longer sacraments offered inside the government-controlled churches, the shepherds continued to tend to their flocks, offering the sacraments outside churches, in private, in homes, barns, fields, wherever possible. Still, the hierarchy continued their battle, doing their best for individual justice against an unjust government. On behalf of all Mexican archbishops and bishops, Archbishop José Mora y del Rio and Bishop Pascual Díaz y Barreto presented, on September 6, 1926, a memorial request, a petition with a statement of facts, to the Chamber of Deputies, the lower house in the Congress of the Union, to remove the persecuting laws, the anti-clerical provisions in the 1917 Constitution. But the laws remained intact. Persecution continued. And Mexico, a Catholic country, devolved into a modern-day catacomb. Christians endured tremendous hardship under the regime that pushed socialism, an ideology embraced by sociopaths, those with antisocial personality disorders, a mental condition with symptoms such as the infliction of physical and psychological violence upon others without remorse, a total disregard for laws and of the implicit unwritten social contract between humans, a complete lack of empathy for other living creatures, and the exhibition of extreme arrogance, to list just a few. For the next few months, Correa suffered a great deal, always on the move, traveling by donkey or by foot from hut to ranch to hacienda to offer the unblooded sacrifice of Calvary and the sacraments, all in secret. Sometimes sleeping in mountain caves, other times in open fields, often hungry, he always continued his pastoral work, toting a knapsack, which protected and safely hid his priestly vestments and the Blessed Sacrament. To avoid authorities, he dressed as a peasant, for it was illegal to wear religious garb, according to the newly enacted Article 18 of Calles' law. Outside of the temples, neither the ministers of cults, nor the individuals of either sex who profess them, may wear special costumes or distinctive features that characterize them, under the governmental penalty of 500 pesos fine, or, failing that, arrest that never exceeds 15 days. In case of recidivism, the penalty of a major arrest and a second-class fine will be imposed. Always, his enemies, the authorities, stalked him. Although his parishioners begged him to secrete himself away and hide, he gently refused and steadfastly continued his God-given vocation, his mission, smiling, trying to convince others that even though his hour was not far away, it had not yet arrived. But then, on Sunday, January 30, 1927, Correa was approached by a peasant who explained that his critically ill mother, confined to her bed, requested a priest, for last rites, the sacrament of extreme unction. Without thinking of the possible peril, he readily agreed and prepared to hear her confession and offer her Holy Communion. Immediately, he informed José María Miranda, dueño of the Hacienda de San José de Sauceda, a great estate where Correa had been staying as a guest since December 23, 1926. After requesting to go along, the two climbed aboard a four-wheel bogacito, a small cart drawn by mules, and headed out. As they traveled down the Mesa of San Pablo, Miranda noticed a very thick dust cloud in the distance. "It seems to me that this is a troop that is coming," he said, suggesting that they turn around or hide somewhere. But Correa disagreed. "No, maybe they already spotted us," and convinced Miranda that if they turned around, it would attract unwanted attention and cause suspicion. Correa grabbed the reins and posed as Miranda's employee. Major José Contreras headed the column of dust-covered cavalry soldiers riding through the cloud of dirt kicked up by their horses. 4 days earlier, on January 26, while leading the Caísta troops against the Cristeros, he suffered a major loss in Huayllurquilla, severely beaten by General Pedro Quintano Zamora, head of Cristero operations in the state of Zacatecas. The battle occurred after Quintano returned from the uprising in Chalchihuites to be with his family in Huayllurquilla. Unlike Contreras, Quintano was not a professional military man. A devout Catholic rancher, he had taken up arms and swore to avenge the horrific executions of the Chalchihuites martyrs, 4 devout Catholics, 1 priest, 3 laymen, on August 15, 1926, at El Puerto de Santa Teresa, now known as Los Lugares Santos, one of the first mass murders in the Cristero War. Stung by the military loss to a band of half-starved, ill-equipped religious fanatics, Contreras agonized over the defeat. Upon his retreat, he verbally assaulted Catholics he met along the way and ordered that the inscription Viva Cristo Rey be removed from all doors. Scofflaws would most certainly face harsh penalties. And adopting the opinion of Ortiz, his boss, Contreras blamed one person as the mastermind behind the Cristero victory under Cristophilic Quintana. That person was another Cristophile, the parish priest of Valparaiso, Correa. In the Bogacito, before too long, Correa and Miranda passed by the line of saddle-weary soldiers riding from Huayllurquilla, guided through the region by José Encarnación Salas, a despised agrarista who favored agrarian policies based on the communist Bolshevik model. He tipped off officials that the Bogacito carried the owner of the sprawling San José estate and a priest from Valparaiso. Contreras sent one of his men, who rode up to the Bogacito. "Where is the Padrecito going to say Mass?" questioned the officer, using the diminutive Padrecito to demean Correa as a little priest, as he took the opportunity and the liberty to reach into the priest's bag and pull out the parish manual with the name, Mateo Correa. "He is my employee at the hacienda," Miranda said of Correa to the officer who already knew who the two were. Soldiers conducted a search of the Bogacito. They found a board, a small flask of holy oil, a bag of corporals, a paten, and an altar linen. Fortunately, they missed the treasured reliquary with a holy host, in which the risen, sacrificial lamb was present. "Turn around," the officer ordered. It was around 12:30 in the early afternoon. "Please let us continue to San Antonio because we have arranged to dine with Don Eugenio Moncalia," Miranda fibbed, trying to extricate himself and the priest from the predicament. "That cannot be. You will have to go with us because we are going to spend the night at your hacienda and you have to give us accommodations. Go as you see fit, behind or in front of the column," they were told. With the intention of arriving back at the hacienda first to safely return the host back in the private chapel's tabernacle and avoid a desecration, they chose to advance before. Correa quickly turned the Bogacito around, snapped the reins, and the mules kicked off for the estate. With only seconds to spare, they arrived before the head of the procession appeared. However, the soldiers did not rest at the hacienda, for they were scheduled to arrive in Fresnillo. Correa and Miranda received orders to start up a hacienda van and to drive it the 60 or so miles to the city, near the pilgrimage site of the Holy Infant of Atocha, a much revered image of a child pilgrim, believed to be the embodiment of Christ, who miraculously fed imprisoned men enslaved by Muslims, who then ruled much of the 13th century Iberian Peninsula. That same day, Sunday, They arrived, under guard, in Fresnillo at 5 in the afternoon. Handed over to the police inspection warden, Correa and Miranda were shuffled around from cell to cell among the prison community of hardened criminals. "It seems we are in the parish," taunted one of their cellmates, greeted with laughter by his fellow miscreants. While in the Fresnillo penitentiary, Correa wrote to his sisters the following short yet profound epistle. "Sisters, it is time to suffer for Jesus Christ who died for us. Have courage and inquire about your brother who blesses you and entrusts you to Jesus through Mary." Received by Guadalupe Correa Magallanes, as soon as she read the letter, she traveled to speak to Ortiz to free her only brother, but the general refused, falsely claiming that the priest had been bringing rebels from Huaychuquilla. Tuesday, February 1st, at 4 in the afternoon, Correa and Miranda were escorted to a train station, where they waited. At 6:30 p.m., they watched as Ortiz's soldiers slowly arrived and loaded their horses into 4 cages on the railcars. At 11 that night, a military train rolled into the station, to which the prisoners' railcar was coupled, and finally departed. Without protection from the elements, Correa and Miranda endured hours of drizzly weather, stung with a constant, icy wind. Wednesday, February 2nd, the train slowed to a stop in the Cañitas station at 4 in the morning. After a 3-hour wait, they continued to the city of Durango and finally pulled into the station at 9:30 that night, when the troops disembarked and unloaded their horses. But the prisoners remained in their van, where they attempted to sleep in the cold, damp, cramped compartment. Thursday, February 3rd, around 6 a.m., the priest and his companion were escorted to a corral on the outskirts of Durango, where the major's men were housed. After 3 hours, they continued to Captain Ogalar's barracks and waited another 2 hours. While biding his time, Correa slipped out of the van and eavesdropped on a conversation, during which he heard the captain telling guards that they were to execute, by gunshot, Correa and Miranda and were to do a good job of it. Returning to the van, deeply shaken, he told Miranda, "Who knows how it will go for us?" At that time, Contreras arrived at the corral with another officer and spoke with Captain Ogalar. Subsequently, the 2 prisoners were escorted to Durango City Operation Headquarters, a former seminary, and locked in a cell. Halfway up the wall, 3 windows let the sunlight seep through, the only light in the darkness that enveloped the men. 2 prisoners were already there, and 2 more soon arrived. Kind to his fellow inmates, Correa shared a few oranges he had and offered advice that they should accept their fate and patiently suffer in prison, which comforted the men, who, as night fell, made a bed for the 60-year-old priest with some desks from an adjoining room. Appreciative of the gesture, he expressed his gratitude to everyone. Friday, February 4th, officers entered the cell for roll call at 7 a.m. and complained that the lazy inmates had not cleaned their filthy area. Correa requested a broom from the corporal and busied himself, sweeping here and there at the dust and debris, refusing to relinquish his cleaning tool until every speck had floated away. During lunch, he shared his oranges with the others and then gave thanks with his fellow inmates before lying down for a nap at noon. He woke light-hearted, and, although at times his mood temporarily darkened with worry, he joked, played charades and shared riddles with the prisoners, trying to entertain them. At 6:30 that evening, dinner time, he only drank coffee and gave his food to the others, suggesting they give thanks and pray the rosary, followed by the grand silence and sleep. Saturday, February 5th, Correa woke up very happy around 8:45 that morning and prayed the Divine Office, after which he announced to Miranda, "Today is the day of Saint Philip of Jesus, Mexican martyr. God help us Don Pepe," repeating the petition several times that day when worry overcame him. Saint Philip, the patron saint of Mexico City, was the first Mexican saint. When the ship he was aboard, in 1597, traveling from the Philippines to Mexico, crashed upon the rocks along the shore of Japan, he and others were falsely accused of preparing the way for foreign soldiers to take over the land of the rising sun. Their captors cut off their ears, marched them through the streets of Kyoto, transported them to Nagasaki and forced them up the Mount of Martyrs, where they were hanged from crosses and pierced with spears. In jail, at 5 in the afternoon, the duty sergeant entered the cell to give 3 oranges, a cake and $1.50 in silver donated by Catholic women to the thankful priest. At 7:30 p.m., dinner arrived, and when finished, Correa prayed the rosary by himself, after which he chatted with 2 others, Jacinto Marufo and Emilio Valdez, sitting around Miranda's bed. Around 8 p.m., the sergeant of the guard entered the cell and ordered Mateo Correa, "Fix your things because General Ortiz wants to speak with you." The guard surprised everyone. A shaken Correa rose and asked Miranda, "Should I take my things?" "Yes," Miranda answered, thinking that the priest was possibly going to be transferred to another cell. To Marufo, the priest said nervously, "Give me the address of your house just in case something is offered to me and to give you news of me." "Tercera de Ricardo Castro No. 12, Colonia Obrera," Marufo answered. Before leaving, Correa walked over to say goodbye to Miranda, who kneeled to receive a final blessing from the priest. "Trust in God," Correa advised, and then walked out of the cell. That night his cellmates waited for him to return. The wait, excruciating. Sunday, February 6th, the next morning, they still waited. When guards arrived to take roll, called out Correa's name and no one answered, one of them said, "That man is now free." Alarmed at the comment, Miranda took the guard by the arm and asked, "Captain, I beg you, please tell me the truth. Where is the priest? Have they placed him in some other department or has something happened to him?" "No, the general sent for him last night," he answered. Frightened, Miranda continued to wait, and wait. Days later, he kneeled to venerate the martyr after learning the truth about his friend's fate. On the night of February 5, 1927, after Correa was removed from his jail cell in the Durango Military Operation Headquarters, he was escorted to Ortiz. First, Ortiz told him, "You are going to confess those rebel bandits who you see there and who are going to be shot immediately. Then we will see what to do with you." Knowing that his hour was not far away, but not knowing if it had arrived, Correa patiently and courageously listened to the confessions of the prisoners, Cristeros taken captive while fighting to defend their faith. An alter Christus, he absolved the penitents of their sins and encouraged them to die well. When finished, he was confronted by Ortiz. "Now, are you going to reveal to me what those bandits have just told you?" "I will never do it," Correa answered, unwilling to break the seal of confession, the absolute duty of priests to never reveal anything heard during confession. "Whatever," the general replied irritably. "I'm going to have you shot immediately. You can do it, but you are aware that a priest must keep the secret of confession." "I am ready to die," Correa answered, prepared to die in odium fide. Between 4 and 5 in the morning, Sunday, February 6, 1927, Correa was removed from the prison and placed in a car that sped off, stopping about half a mile from the Durango Municipal Cemetery. Ordered out, the ordinary priest in extraordinary circumstances was promptly executed, his body dumped, abandoned in a field. His corpse was discovered, on February 8, and the following day, soldiers buried Correa's body where it had been found. Subsequently, family and faithful searching for the priest found the recently shoveled mound of earth, his freshly dug grave. Nearby, they noticed bloodstains and clumps of blooded hair on stones, over which they surmised that his body must have been dragged. They also found his hat, a piece of scarf, and a pistol cap. His remains lay undisturbed until the following year, when his corpse was exhumed, transferred, and laid to rest in the Durango Municipal Cemetery, on May 8, 1928.